TEMBO lay in a dark cave, surrounded by 5 snarling dogs, their eyes glowing like embers. His hands shook as he buried a blood-stained cloth under a pile of hides, whispering, "No one can know." Outside, Kweku watched, his bone earrings clinking, heart pounding with fear. Was TEMBO mad? Or hiding something worse? Welcome back. As you enjoy the story, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and also share with your friends. Now back to the story. The moon cast a pale glow over the hills, barely reaching the cave where TEMBO lay among 5 lean dogs, their eyes glinting like sparks in the dark. He clutched a blood-stained cloth, his hands shaking as he buried it under a pile of animal hides. The dogs growled low, their ears twitching, as if they heard something TEMBO didn't. Outside, a warrior named Kweku crouched in the shadows, his bone earrings clinking faintly as he leaned closer, heart racing. TEMBO whispered to the dogs, his voice rough, "You keep him safe, you hear? No one can know." Kweku's breath caught. What was TEMBO hiding? The village already called him mad, but this felt darker, like a secret tied to blood. The dogs' growls sharpened, and Kweku slipped away into the night, his mind buzzing with fear and questions. In the village of Kazi, nestled high in the hills, the air smelled of dry grass and wood smoke. Round huts of mud and thatch dotted the slopes, their roofs woven with grass that rustled in the wind. Men wore hide cloaks dyed with red earth, patched with hyena or antelope skin, while women draped themselves in leather skirts, bone beads rattling at their waists. The village square, shaded by acacia trees, was alive with the beat of drums during harvest feasts, where elders told tales of brave hunters and loyal dogs. Dogs weren't just animals in Kazi. They were partners, guarding huts, joining hunts, their loyalty a measure of a man's honor. TEMBO was Kazi's best hunter, a quiet man with broad shoulders and eyes that saw more than he said. His hide cloak, patched with hyena fur, hung loose, and a single bone earring swung from his left ear, a gift from his mother long gone. He could track a gazelle through a storm or fell a boar with one spear throw. But for months, TEMBO had changed. He stopped sitting with the men at the fire pit, sharing tales of the hunt. Instead, he lived in a cave at the village's edge, surrounded by his 5 dogs, lean, scarred beasts named Baiko, Zuri, Kofi, Mala, and Tisa. At night, their howls drifted over the hills, sharp and mournful, like a cry for something lost. The villagers whispered, "Why does TEMBO sleep with dogs? Is he broken?" Some said he was mad. Others feared he was hiding something worse. The whispers began after TEMBO's brother, Django, was named a traitor. Django had been a warrior, tall and proud, with a laugh that carried across the hills. 2 harvests ago, the elders accused him of a terrible crime. They said Django had spoken to men from the Mwizi, a rival village beyond the river, who coveted Kazi's fertile fields and deep wells. The elders claimed Django told the Mwizi the secret paths through the hills, paths only Kazi's warriors knew. When the Mwizi attacked one night, burning huts and stealing goats, the village turned on Django. He swore he was innocent, but Chief Mzuri, a stern man with gray hair braided with red beads, banished him. Django fled, leaving behind his 5 dogs and a name the village spat upon. TEMBO never spoke of Django after that. He took the dogs, fed them, trained them, and kept them close. Then he left his hut in the village and moved to the cave. The women stopped inviting him to feasts, their bone beads clicking as they turned away. The men no longer asked him to lead hunts, their spears idle when he passed. Even the children, who once trailed him for stories, now scattered, their bare feet pounding the earth. TEMBO carries Django's shame, they said. He sleeps with dogs because he's lost his way. Kweku, the young warrior who had spied on TEMBO, couldn't forget what he'd seen. The blood-stained cloth, the whispered words, it wasn't right. Kweku was new to manhood, his hide cloak still stiff, his bone earrings freshly carved from his initiation. He had a wife, Afi, and a son too young to walk far. Kweku wanted to prove himself to Chief Mzuri, to show he could protect Kazi. TEMBO's strangeness felt like a threat, and Kweku was determined to uncover it. The next morning, he went to the village square, where the elders sat under an acacia tree, their staffs planted in the dirt. Mzuri, his hide cloak heavy with age, listened as Kweku spoke. "I saw TEMBO in the cave," Kweku said, his voice low but clear. "He buried a cloth, stained with blood. He talked to the dogs like they were men. I think he's hiding something, maybe about Django." The elders murmured, their bone necklaces clicking. Mzuri's eyes narrowed. "TEMBO was a good man once," he said, "but shame can twist a heart. Watch him, Kweku. If he's a danger, we will know." Kweku nodded, his chest tight with purpose. He didn't tell the elders everything. Not how the dog's eyes seemed to follow him as he ran, or how TEMBO's whispers sounded more like sorrow than treachery. Kweku would keep watching, and he would find the truth. In the cave, TEMBO sat with the dogs, the air thick with the smell of damp stone and fur. His spear leaned against the wall, its tip dull from years of use. Biko, the largest dog, pressed against him, while Zuri's ears flicked at the wind outside. TEMBO ran his hand over Biko's scarred flank, feeling the dog's warmth. "You remember him, don't you?" he whispered. The dog's eyes met his, steady and loyal. TEMBO's heart was heavy. He hadn't chosen this life, this loneliness, but he had a promise to keep, one the village couldn't understand. Django wasn't a traitor, not the way they thought. The blood-stained cloth wasn't a sign of crime. It was proof of something else, something Django had done for Kazi. TEMBO had to protect the dogs, no matter what it cost him. That night, as the moon climbed higher, TEMBO heard footsteps outside the cave. The dogs growled, their hackles rising. He gripped his spear, his pulse quickening. Someone was out there, watching. He didn't know who, but he felt the village's distrust growing, like a storm gathering over the hills. TEMBO looked at the dogs, their bodies tense but loyal. "We'll keep him safe," he said softly, "no matter what." By the next day, the whispers in Kazi had spread like fire. Kweku had talked to others, and the village buzzed with suspicion. "TEMBO buries blood in the cave," one woman said, clutching her bone beads as she stirred yam stew. "He speaks to dogs like they're spirits," another said, her leather skirt swaying. The men sharpened their spears, their eyes darting toward the hills where TEMBO's cave sat. Mzuri called a meeting in the square, his voice booming over the drums. "TEMBO was one of us," he said. "But if he hides treachery, we will act. Kweku will watch him. If the dogs are a danger, they will not live." TEMBO felt the village's fear, even from the cave. He didn't know Kweku was spying, but he sensed the danger. The dogs paced, their claws scraping the stone. TEMBO touched the hidden cloth, buried deeper now. It held Django's secret, the one thing that could change everything. But if the village found it too soon, they would destroy it, and Django's name would be lost forever. As the sun sank, casting long shadows over Kazi, scouts ran into the square, their faces grim. The Mwizi had been seen in the hills, their spears glinting. The elders feared another attack. And in their fear, they looked to TEMBO, the brother of a traitor, and wondered if he was to blame. The moon hung low over Kazi, bathing the hills in a soft, milky glow. TEMBO sat in his cave, the 5 dogs curled around him on the cold stone floor. Their fur brushed against his hide cloak, patched with hyena skin, and their steady breathing was the only sound in the dark. He ran his fingers over the spot where the blood-stained cloth lay hidden beneath a pile of animal hides. That cloth wasn't just a rag. It was proof, a piece of Django's truth. TEMBO's chest tightened as he thought of his brother, his wide grin, his fearless heart. The village called Django a traitor, but TEMBO knew better. He just couldn't tell them, not yet, not without risking everything. The wind outside carried the faint thump of drums from the village square. Kazi was restless. The scouts' news of Mwizi warriors in the hills had spread fear like a sickness. Down in the village, men sharpened their spears, bone earrings glinting by firelight. Women wove grass mats, their whispers sharp as they pounded yams. "TEMBO's hiding something," they said. "Why else sleep with dogs in a cave?" The children, clutching sticks they called spears, sang cruel songs about TEMBO, the mad hunter who lived with beasts. Their voices stung, but TEMBO stayed away, his heart heavy with a secret he couldn't share. Kweku, the young warrior, moved through the village, his new hide cloak stiff against his shoulders. His wife, Afi, had begged him to stay home, her hands busy braiding their son's hair with tiny bone beads. "Don't chase trouble," she said, her eyes soft with worry. But Kweku couldn't let it go. He'd seen TEMBO with that blood-stained cloth, heard his strange whispers to the dogs. It wasn't just curiosity now, it was his duty to protect Kazi. If TEMBO was hiding treachery, Kweku would uncover it and prove himself to Chief Mzuri. He tightened his grip on his spear and slipped toward the cave, the night hiding his steps. In the cave, TEMBO fed the dogs strips of dried meat, his hands steady despite the ache in his chest. Biko, the largest dog, nudged his palm, while Zuri's ears twitched at a faint sound. TEMBO froze. Footsteps, soft but careful, crunched outside the cave. The dogs growled, low and sharp, their bodies stiff. TEMBO gripped his spear, its wooden shaft worn smooth from years of hunts. "Quiet," he whispered, and the dogs obeyed, their eyes fixed on the cave's mouth. The footsteps paused, then faded. Whoever it was had gone. For now, TEMBO's shoulders sagged, but his mind raced. Someone was watching, and the village's trust was crumbling. By morning, the village square buzzed with tension. Chief Mzuri stood tall, his gray hair braided with red beads, his hide cloak heavy with age. The elders sat around him, bone necklaces clicking as they leaned forward. Kweku stepped into the circle, his voice steady but loud enough for the crowd to hear. "I went to TEMBO's cave again," he said. "The dogs growled like they guard something evil. I saw him hide that cloth, stained with blood. He's keeping secrets, maybe Django's secrets." The crowd gasped, women clutching their leather skirts, men muttering about betrayal. Mzuri raised a hand, his voice like stone. "TEMBO was our brother once, but if he follows Django's path, he will face judgment. Kweku, bring proof." Kweku nodded, his heart pounding with purpose. He didn't tell the elders everything. Not how the dog's growls had chilled him or how TEMBO's eyes, when he'd glimpsed them, looked more sad than guilty. Kweku would keep watching, and he would find the truth. TEMBO felt the village's eyes on him, even from the hills. He hadn't gone to the square in weeks, but he knew the whispers were growing louder. He walked to the stream below the cave, his bone earring swaying as he knelt to fill a gourd with water. The dogs followed, their paws silent on the earth. TEMBO splashed water on his face, the cold biting his skin. He thought of Django, the night he'd run from Kazi, his cloak torn, his voice hoarse as he made TEMBO swear. "Keep them safe," Django had said, his hand on Biko's head. "They're all that's left." TEMBO hadn't understood then, but he did now. The dogs weren't just Django's, they were Kazi's salvation. The village didn't know what Django had done. They thought he'd betrayed them, told the Mwizi the paths to Kazi's wells and fields. But Django had done something else, something the elders couldn't see. The blood-stained cloth was part of it, a piece of proof TEMBO guarded with his life. He couldn't tell the village, not yet. If they found the cloth before he was ready, they'd burn it, and Django's name would stay cursed forever. That evening, the drums in the square grew louder, calling the men to a hunt. TEMBO heard them from the cave, their rhythm sharp and urgent. He knew why. The Mwizi were close, their spears seen in the hills. Kazi's warriors would patrol tonight, their hide cloaks blending with the dark. TEMBO wanted to join them, to prove he was still one of them, but he couldn't leave the dogs. He couldn't leave the cloth. He sat with Biko, Zuri, Kofi, Mala and Tisa, their warmth steadying him. "You know why," he whispered. "You know what he did." Kweku didn't join the hunt. Instead, he crept back to the cave, his spear light in his hand. He hid behind a rock, watching as TEMBO fed the dogs, their eyes glinting in the firelight. Kweku's heart raced. He saw TEMBO lift a hide, check the buried cloth, then cover it again. Kweku's fingers tightened on his spear. He wanted to run to the elders to tell them what he'd seen, but he needed more. He needed to know what TEMBO was hiding, why the dogs mattered so much. In the village, the women gathered under the acacia trees, their bone beads clicking as they spoke. "TEMBO's dogs are a bad sign," one said, her hands busy weaving a mat. "He's like Django, plotting against us." Another added, her leather skirt swaying as she stirred a pot. The men returned from the hunt empty-handed, their faces grim. The Mwizi had vanished into the hills, leaving only footprints. The elders met again, their voices low. "TEMBO knows the paths," one said. "Maybe he's helping the Mwizi, like his brother." Mzuri's eyes darkened. "If Kweku brings proof, we will act. The dogs will not live if they carry treachery." TEMBO sensed the danger growing. The dogs were restless, pacing the cave, their claws scraping the stone. He touched the hidden cloth, his fingers tracing its rough edges. It held Django's secret, a truth that could save his name. But the village was closing in, their fear turning to anger. TEMBO looked at the dogs, their eyes steady and loyal. "We'll protect him," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Even if they hate us." As the sun sank, casting long shadows over Kazi, the scouts ran into the square, their breath short. The Mwizi were closer now, their fires seen in the valley. The village prepared for war, sharpening spears, weaving new shields from grass and hide. And in their fear, they looked to TEMBO's cave, wondering if the brother of a traitor was leading their enemies to their door. The night was thick with tension in Kazi, the hills cloaked in darkness as storm clouds swallowed the moon. TEMBO sat in his cave, the 5 dogs, Baiko, Zuri, Kofi, Mala, and Tisa, pressed close, their fur warm against his hide cloak. The air smelled of damp stone and the faint smoke of distant fires. TEMBO's fingers brushed the pile of animal hides where the blood-stained cloth lay hidden. His heart pounded, heavy with the secret he'd carried for so long. Django's name, his truth, rested in that cloth and the dogs around him. The village saw only a traitor's brother, but TEMBO knew Django had saved them all. Tonight, he felt the weight of that truth pressing down, like the storm ready to break. In the village, the drums beat faster, their rhythm sharp with warning. The Mwizi were close, their fires spotted in the valley below. Men gathered in the square, their hide cloaks tied tight, bone earrings swaying as they checked spears and shields woven from grass and hide. Women whispered prayers, their bone beads clicking as they tied protective charms around their children's wrists. The scouts had seen Mwizi warriors moving through the hills, silent and swift, their numbers growing. Chief Mzuri stood tall, his gray hair braided with red beads, his voice steady but grim. "We fight at dawn," he said. "The Mwizi want our wells, our fields. We will not let them take Kazi." Kweku stood among the warriors, his new hide cloak stiff, his spear gripped tight. His eyes kept drifting to the hills, to TEMBO's cave. He told the elders about the blood-stained cloth, the dogs, TEMBO's whispers. The village buzzed with fear. Certain TEMBO was helping the Mwizi, just like Django. Kweku wanted to believe there was another reason, but the cloth haunted him. Why blood? Why hide it? He'd heard AFI's pleas to stay safe, to focus on their son, but Kweku needed to prove himself. He needed to know the truth. Tonight, he'd go to the cave one last time before the battle came. TEMBO sensed the storm wasn't just in the sky. The dogs were restless, pacing the cave, their claws scraping the stone. Baiko growled low, his scarred flank tense, while Zuri's ears flicked toward the entrance. TEMBO's bone earrings swayed as he stood, spear in hand. He'd heard the drums, felt the village's fear turning to anger. They were coming for him, he knew it. The Mwizi were close, and Kazi needed someone to blame. TEMBO looked at the dogs, their eyes steady and loyal. "It's time," he whispered. He couldn't wait any longer. The truth had to come out, even if it cost him everything. Kweku crept through the hills, his footsteps muffled by the grass. The cave loomed ahead, its mouth dark except for the faint glow of TEMBO's fire. Kweku's heart raced. He'd seen TEMBO check the cloth too many times, heard his murmurs to the dogs. This time he'd take the cloth, show it to Mzuri, and end the mystery. As he neared, the dogs growled, their eyes locking on him through the dark. Kweku froze, his spear raised, but TEMBO stepped into the firelight, his face tired but firm. "Kweku," TEMBO said, his voice low, "you've watched me long enough. Come inside." Kweku hesitated, his hand trembling. The dogs didn't lunge, but their growls hummed in the air. Against his better judgment, he stepped into the cave, the smell of fur and stone thick around him. TEMBO knelt by the hides, his hands slow as he pulled out the blood-stained cloth. Kweku's breath caught. The cloth was small, torn, stained dark red. TEMBO held it out, his eyes meeting Kweku's. "This isn't what you think," he said. "It's Django's. It's proof he didn't betray us." Kweku's mouth went dry. "Django gave the Mwizi our paths," he said. "He brought them to our doors." TEMBO shook his head, his bone earring glinting. "No. Django went to the Mwizi to warn them away. He met their chief, offered peace, but they turned on him. They cut him, left him to die. This cloth is his blood. From the night he ran back to warn us." TEMBO's voice broke. "He reached the hills, found me, told me the Mwizi were coming. He died in my arms. Kweku. His dogs stayed with him, and I swore to keep them safe." Kweku stared, his spear heavy in his hand. "Why hide it? Why not tell Mzuri?" TEMBO's eyes darkened. "The elders wouldn't listen. They'd already named him traitor. If I spoke, they'd burn this cloth, kill his dogs, erase his name forever. The dogs know the paths Django took. They can lead us to the Mwizi's camp, show where he fell. They're proof he saved us." Before Kweku could answer, shouts echoed from the hills. The Mwizi were attacking, their spears flashing in the dark. TEMBO grabbed his spear, the dogs leaping to their feet. "Come with me," he said. "You'll see." Kweku followed, his mind spinning, as TEMBO and the dogs ran toward the village. The square was chaos. Mwizi warriors poured in, their hide cloaks marked with white ash, their spears striking fast. Kazi's men fought back, their bone earrings swinging as they clashed. Mzuri shouted orders, his red beads bright in the firelight. TEMBO burst into the square, the dogs at his side, their barks sharp and fierce. He pointed to Baiko. "Follow them," he yelled. The dogs ran, weaving through the hills, TEMBO and Kweku behind them. The warriors hesitated, then followed, their trust in TEMBO shaky but desperate. The dogs led them to a narrow path, hidden by rocks, where Django's body had lain 2 harvests ago. TEMBO stopped, his breath ragged, and pointed to a stone marked with scratches. Django's mark, a sign he'd left for Kazi. Kweku knelt, his fingers tracing the scratches, his heart sinking. The dogs circled, their eyes fixed on the path leading to the Mwizi camp. TEMBO held up the cloth. "He died here," he said, warning us. He wasn't a traitor. The warriors saw the cloth, the scratches, the dog's fierce loyalty. Mzuri stepped forward, his face heavy with shame. "We were wrong," he said. The Mwizi attacked again, but Kazi's men, led by the dogs, fought with new strength. They drove the Mwizi back, their spears finding the hidden paths Django had marked. When the dawn broke, Kazi stood strong, the Mwizi retreating into the valley. In the square, the village gathered, their hide cloaks torn, bone beads scattered. Mzuri took the blood-stained cloth, his hands trembling. "Django was our son," he said. "We failed him. TEMBO, you kept his truth." The elders nodded, their bone necklaces clicking. TEMBO stood with the dogs, his eyes wet but proud. Kweku stepped forward, his spear lowered. "I doubted you," he said. "I was wrong." TEMBO nodded, his bone earring still. "You wanted to protect Kazi," he said. "So did Django." The village honored Django that day, drumming for his spirit, weaving his name into their songs. TEMBO returned to his hut, the dogs at his side, no longer shunned. The lesson was clear. Redemption comes through sacrifice, and loyalty to family, even in death, is stronger than fear. Kazi would never forget Django, or the dogs that carried his truth. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, and turn on your notification for more. See you soon.